Now, for analysis, political analyst Khanyi Magubane joins us now via Zoom. Khanyi, thank you so much for your time this afternoon. Now, of course, a big sigh of relief, I think, for a lot of South Africans, just given the fact that even where we are today, it is because of some very brave South African citizens who saw something happening in this country that spoke to corruption and, of course, ultimately the state capture of this country and decided to speak out. That's where we saw all the wheels starting to roll. And here we are with the commission having completed its task. But, of course, this is, a huge indictment in terms of just how it's left the country. But I want to start off the conversation in terms of where it's left the ANC-led government. I mean, you heard there in the introduction, Zondo Commission saying that it finds it very, very difficult that President Cyril Ramaphosa at the time, of course, he was a deputy president, did not know of what was happening and that he actually ought to know. What do we make about what the commission has found in as far as the ANC is concerned, being complicit to what ultimately is now called state capture?
Good afternoon, Onati. I think that the State Capture Commission coming to an end is something that at some point we never thought would happen because of just how long it took. And now that the fifth and final installment of the report has been submitted, we can understand why the commission took so long, because its reference was so broad and there was so much to be investigated. In terms of your question, it has left the ANC wanting, it has left them vulnerable, and it has left them exposed, because we know that in every volume of the State Capture Commission report that has been published and handed over to the presidency, there have been high-ranking ministers, there have been senior members of the ANC who've been implicated, there have been former ministers of different departments that have been implicated. I mean, we look at individuals like Ace Magashule, like Umsebenzi Zwane, who the commission has recommended pay back the 280 million rand that was siphoned out of the rural and agriculture department of the Free State, and that is related to the Estina Frieda farm debacle, which for all intents and purposes was created to fund the Gupta wedding, which took place in Sun City, and that also relates to the Waterkloof landing. We know that the presidency, or the former President Zuma, had said that he had no knowledge of the Waterkloof landing, and I find it very unbelievable that the number one citizen of this country, or in the very least civil aviation authorities in this country, had no idea that a plane full of Indian citizens coming to South Africa for a wedding had landed without any passports or any other documents that actually allowed them to be in this country. We can point to state-owned enterprises like Transnet, like Eskom, which have been cited as having procured 97% of the state capture corruption. So, Wenati, there's a lot to be captured in a few minutes, but I think the overall sentiment is that the ANC cannot undo what has been found in these reports, and that the ANC itself needs to be the first one to come out and say they will abide by the recommendations of the commission, and that where prosecutions need to take place, they will not protect any of their own.
Of course, the fifth and final report contained, of course, certain SOEs and other entities. Let's talk now about the big elephant in the room. Of course, a lot of people waiting to see what the report said about the State Security Agency. And of course, Arthur Fraser's name coming out very prominently there, with the commissioner recommending that Arthur Fraser himself be investigated by law enforcement agencies. Where does this now now place? Just him coming out a few weeks ago with that big bombshell telling, the entire world essentially that President Cyril Ramaphosa should be criminally, charged for several transgressions that he has made in this country as it relates to his Phala Phala farm. And now here we are with the commission recommending that this very man who has implicated a sitting president of crime be also investigated and charged.
Well, I think we always expected Arthur Fraser to feature quite prominently in this report because it was important for the SSA to be investigated in terms of how it was alleged to have used resources, intelligence resources, for the sole purpose of dealing with the adversaries of former President Jacob Zuma. The parallel intelligence agency that you speak of a short few minutes ago said to have been established primarily for the purpose of, dealing and bugging and investigating and having intelligence operatives investigating those who are said to have been trying to topple the former President Jacob Zuma and to protect the network. The intelligence was there to protect this network that the State Commission report has now since uncovered. And I don't think that we should separate the two. I definitely think that we should separate the two. I don't think we should look at it as one thing, that just because Arthur Fraser has now been implicated, that we should now call into question the validity or, of the claims that he made against the president a few weeks ago. We know, Unathi, that there is no honor amongst thieves, and that at some point they all start to out each other. And I believe that we are in that part of our democracy where those who once stole together and ate together are now exposing each other. And Arthur Fraser is not above the law. He should be investigated. And I think that the State Security Agency as a whole and the security cluster as a whole must be investigated. And it has to be clear that there was a compromise of the State Security Agency, severely so, to a point where we had a parallel intelligence agency running, which I would absolutely think that any South African would be shocked to hear use the same resources, the same intelligence operatives, the same executives that were meant to be protecting the country. They were busy with other mandates. And so I would love to see how those who were involved in this PAN agency that you spoke of will be prosecuted. And I think Arthur Fraser himself was expecting to be fingered in this report. And I would love to think that this does not absolve the president from the Phala Phala Gate debacle that has happened, but I would love to see the jurisdictions of the two being separated and the two matters being investigated separately.
Now, just talking about, people who we assumed would feature prominently, one of those is obviously former President Jacob Zuma. Now, in its recommendation, of course, we know that the Commission is saying that it is recommending that the electoral reform, be considered again. But one of the subsections in the recommendations, and I'd like to read it, where the Commission specifically speaks to, just the conduct of President Jacob Zuma during his tenure. It says, we are bound to ask the question, how did this country end up having a president, someone who would act the way President Zuma acted, someone that could remove as good a public servant as Mr. Themba Maseko from his position just so that he could put someone else into that position and would cooperate with the Guptas and give them business, a president who would fire Minister of Finance just because his friends wanted someone else in that position who would cooperate with his friends and help them to capture the country. Just your thoughts in line of, just some of those recommendations from the Commission, particularly as it speaks to the electoral reform recommendations where South Africans should, in fact, be voting for an individual.
Well, Unathi, in terms of the blurb that you just read out, it speaks to the makings of impunity. We know that impunity is absolute power. And I think that's what the former president exercised. He exercised the absolute power that his position as a president gave him. Did he abuse those powers? I think that is where we need to focus. And we know that the State Commission was established in terms of recommendations from a previous report that was released by former Public Protector Thuli Madonsela after the matter was put to her office for investigation. And ultimately, Unathi, for us at the end of the day to measure whether the commission has been successful or not, it will really be in a year or 2 or 3's time where we see how far the recommendations have come. I'm assuming that a lot of people are going to try and dodge the recommendations of the report. We are most likely to see a lot of individuals take the recommendations on review with their legal representatives. We're going to see a lot of mudslinging and wrangling in courts. And for all intents and purposes, I think the president himself, or the former president Jacob Zuma, knew that it would come to this. Hence, he himself did the most to avoid his day in court. Well, in the commission, not in court, but they played a cat and mouse game between the commission and the former president, which ultimately led to the president being incarcerated in escort. And until we know at the end of the day what he has to say on the matter, we can only just speculate, what the commission will actually do in terms of bringing the former president to book. Will there be formal charges that are laid before him? Will he be prosecuted? We know that the former president is a master of playing the cat and mouse game in terms of coming in and out of the courts and issues of postponements and appeals. He's been doing that for years and years and years. He's a master at playing that game. And so I don't think that he would do any different this time. And so, Unathi, there is a very it is a very real possibility that at the end of the day, maybe none of the recommendations of the Zondo Commission will be implemented to its fullest extent if people continue to dodge the courts, as I am anticipating that they will.
Absolutely. Khanyi Magubane, thank you so much for giving us your take into that report.